The message sits there. Delivered. Read at 11:42 p.m. No reply. You know the feeling. You've typed something out, nothing dramatic, nothing needy, just a normal message, the kind you've sent 100 times before, and then you watch the little read tag appear under it like a door closing softly in another room. Not slammed, just closed. You tell yourself it's nothing. People get busy. People fall asleep with their phones in their hands. You've done it yourself, more than once, left someone on read by accident, felt a flicker of guilt the next morning and fired off a sorry, so tired last night, and moved on. But this isn't the first time. And somewhere underneath the part of you that's making excuses, there's another part, quieter, more honest, that already knows something has shifted. Not ended. Shifted. Like a photograph slightly out of focus. Everything's still there. It just doesn't look the same anymore. This is a story about that shift. About a friendship that didn't explode, didn't have a final fight, didn't have a moment you could point to and say, that's when it ended. It just thinned. Like fabric worn down in one place until, one day, you put your hand through it, and there's nothing there. And along the way, we're going to stop, a few times, and ask why. Not just, why did this happen to me, but why it happens at all. Why some friendships survive decades of distance and silence, and others die from something as small as an unanswered text at 11:42 p.m. Nobody remembers the exact day a friendship starts. That's one of the strange asymmetries of human connection. Endings get dates. Beginnings get blurred into a general sense of, we've always known each other. Even when that's not true. Even when you can trace it back if you really try. Maybe it was a shared table in a cafeteria. Maybe it was a group project neither of you wanted to be in. Two strangers exchanging a look that said this is going to be annoying, isn't it? And somehow that shared irritation became the first thread of something. Maybe it was simpler than that. Proximity. You lived near each other, worked near each other, existed in the same rotation of days long enough that familiarity did what it always does. It turned into comfort, and comfort turned into trust. Psychologists call this the mere exposure effect, the well-documented finding that we tend to develop a preference for things and people simply because we're repeatedly exposed to them. It sounds almost insulting when you say it plainly. You didn't become close because of some deep compatibility. You became close because you kept showing up in the same place. But that's not the insulting part. The insulting part is what happens later when the exposure stops. Because friendships built on proximity, the college friend, the coworker, the neighbor, the person from your old apartment building, are quietly, structurally dependent on something neither of you ever named out loud. Continued contact. Not love. Not commitment. Contact. The unglamorous, mechanical fact of being near each other often enough that the relationship gets fed without either of you having to consciously decide to feed it. And when that contact stops, when someone moves, changes jobs, gets a new partner who takes up most of the social bandwidth, has a kid, starts a different shift, the friendship doesn't have anything holding it up except whatever effort the two of you are now willing to choose to make. And that's the moment most friendships reveal what they actually were. Some of them were built on more than proximity, and they survive the test easily, sometimes even strengthen. You go months without talking, and then pick up a call like no time passed at all. But a lot of friendships, if we're honest, were never really tested until that moment. They ran entirely on the automatic fuel of physical closeness. And once that fuel is gone, you find out, sometimes gently, sometimes with a gut punch, that there wasn't a second engine underneath. This is the story of a friendship that ran out of fuel. Let's call the friend Mara, not her real name, but a real pattern, one that will probably sound familiar to a lot of people listening to this. You met Mara in your first month at a new job. She trained you, actually, showed you where the good coffee machine was, which manager to avoid on Mondays, the shortcuts nobody put in the onboarding packet. Within a few weeks, you were eating lunch together every day. Within a few months, you had a whole shared language, inside jokes, nicknames for annoying coworkers, a running commentary on office politics that made an 8-hour shift feel like something you were surviving together instead of alone. It didn't feel fragile. It felt like the opposite of fragile. It felt like one of those friendships that starts fast and somehow skips the awkward getting to know you phase entirely, like you'd known each other in some other life and were just picking the thread back up. For 2 years, that held. Then she left the job. Not dramatically, a better offer, more money, a shorter commute. You were happy for her, genuinely. You told her so. You said, "We have to still get lunch." And she said, "Obviously." And for a while, you did. Every couple of weeks, then every month, then, quietly, without either of you deciding it. Not at all. Here's the thing that makes this kind of loss so specifically disorienting. Nobody did anything wrong. There's a particular grief reserved for the relationships that don't have a villain. If Mara had said something cruel, if there'd been a betrayal, a falling out, a reason, you could grieve that the way you grieve most things, with anger first, then sadness, then, eventually, closure, because anger gives you somewhere to put the pain. It gives the loss a shape. But when nothing happens, when the friendship just quietly stops being fed, there's no shape to hold on to. You can't be angry at someone for being busy. You can't demand closure from a slow fade, because a slow fade, by definition, never arrives at a clear endpoint you could point to and grieve properly. Researchers who study relationship dissolution call this ambiguous loss, a term originally developed to describe grief without a body, grief where the person is gone, but there's no funeral, no ritual, no socially agreed upon moment where you're allowed to say, "This is over now, and it's okay to feel what I feel about it." A friendship that fades instead of ends is a small, quiet version of that same ambiguity. The person is still there. You could text them right now. They'd probably even reply. But the relationship isn't, not in the way it was, and there's no ceremony for mourning a version of closeness that technically still exists in name, but not in practice. This is part of why fading friendships hurt in a way that's hard to explain to people who haven't experienced it, or worse, hard to explain to yourself. You'll catch yourself thinking, "Why does this bother me so much? Nothing bad happened." And that's exactly the problem. Nothing bad happened, and something you valued is gone anyway, and there's no framework for processing a loss that has no incident attached to it. The first missed lunch was rescheduled. The second one just quietly didn't happen. No reschedule, no mention of it again, like it had evaporated from both your calendars without either of you noticing. You saw her post something online, a promotion, a trip, a dog she'd adopted, and you liked it, and she liked your comment back, and that became, for a while, the entire architecture of the friendship. Not conversation. Acknowledgement. A small red heart standing in for the 2-hour lunches you used to have, the shared jokes about the Monday manager, the sense of being known. You told yourself this was normal. People drift. That's what people say, isn't it? We just drifted. It's such a gentle word for something that, if you actually sit with it, is a little bit devastating. Drift implies nobody's fault, nobody's choice, just current and tide. Two boats that used to be tied to the same dock slowly moving in different directions because the water moved them there. But drift isn't quite the whole truth either. Drift suggests passivity, that neither of you could have done anything. And the harder, more uncomfortable truth sitting underneath most fading friendships is that drift is often a series of small, active non-choices. The text that could have been sent and wasn't. The lunch invite that got typed out and deleted because it felt like too much effort that week. The moment you thought, "I should check in on her," and then didn't, not out of malice, just out of the particular exhaustion of modern life, where even maintaining the relationships you value competes for the same depleted energy as everything else. Nobody decided to end the friendship with Mara, but somewhere in there, dozens of small decisions, hers and yours both, quietly built the same outcome that one big decision would have. That's the part that's hard to accept. Passive neglect and active rejection can produce an identical result. The friendship is gone either way. Only the story you get to tell yourself about why is different. There's a psychological reason fading friendships sneak up on us, and it has to do with how gradually our brains adjust to loss when the loss happens in small enough increments. Think about how differently you'd react to two scenarios. In the first, Mara calls you and says, "I don't think we should be friends anymore." That's a single, sharp data point. Your brain registers it immediately as an event, painful, but legible. You know exactly what happened and exactly when. In the second scenario, the one that actually happened, the frequency of contact decreases by maybe 10% a month. Month 1, you talk 4 times. Month 2, 3.5 times. By month 8, once if that. At no single point does the decrease feel dramatic enough to register as an event. Each individual month looks almost the same as the one before it. It's only when you zoom out, when you compare month 1 to month 12, that the scale of the change becomes visible. This is sometimes described using the metaphor of the boiling frog, probably not biologically accurate as a description of actual frogs, but psychologically accurate as a description of us. We're built to notice sudden change and largely built to not notice gradual change, because gradual change, evolutionarily, usually wasn't the kind of thing that required an urgent response. A slowly cooling relationship doesn't trigger the same alarm system a sudden betrayal does, even though the end result, the loss of the friendship, is identical. By the time you consciously register, "I haven't talked to Mara in months," the friendship has usually already been gone, in any functional sense, for a while. The awareness lags behind the reality. And that lag is part of what makes the grief, when it finally arrives, feel disproportionate to whatever prompted it. A photo online, an unanswered message, a mutual friend mentioning her name. It's not disproportionate. It's delayed. You're not grieving the small trigger. You're grieving everything that quietly accumulated underneath it while you weren't looking. Here's something that might be uncomfortable to hear, but I think it's worth sitting with. You have probably been Mara to somebody. There is very likely a version of this story where you are not the one left on read, but the one who left. A friend from a job you don't work at anymore. A person from a chapter of your life that closed when you moved, or graduated, or had a kid, or just got tired in the specific way adulthood makes you tired, where maintaining every relationship you've ever valued starts to feel like a second full-time job you didn't apply for. If you think about that person, really think about them, whoever they are, you'll probably notice you don't feel like a villain. You didn't mean to disappear on them. You were just surviving your own life, and their friendship, which used to require no active effort at all, suddenly required effort you didn't have. And so, slowly, without ever deciding to, you let it go quiet. That's not an excuse for anyone. It's just the same mechanism, seen from the other side. Almost nobody sets out to fade on someone they cared about. It happens the way most quiet losses happen, not through cruelty, but through the accumulation of 1,000 moments where doing nothing was easier than doing something, until doing nothing became the whole relationship. None of this is meant to make you feel resigned to losing people or to suggest that every friendship is destined to dissolve the moment proximity ends. Plenty aren't. Plenty survive distance, survive years, survive silence, and pick back up exactly where they left off. The friendships that do that usually have something underneath the proximity, a real compatibility, a mutual sense that the other person's presence in your life matters enough that both people are willing to spend effort keeping it alive even when it's inconvenient. But here's the practical piece. If you're sitting with a Mara of your own right now, someone you can feel slipping, the instinct is often to wait, to see if they reach out first, to protect yourself from the vulnerability of caring more than the other person seems to. That instinct makes sense. Nobody wants to be the one chasing a friendship that's already quietly over. But it also guarantees the outcome you're afraid of, because if both people are waiting for the other to make the first move, the silence just gets longer by default, not by anyone's decision. One honest message can do more than months of hoping the other person notices the distance too. Not a big, dramatic conversation. Most fading friendships don't need that, and forcing one can feel heavier than the friendship can currently hold. Just something small and low stakes. "I miss talking to you. No big thing, just wanted to say it." It costs almost nothing to send. And it does one important thing. It turns an ambiguous loss into a clear choice. Either the friendship still has enough left in it to respond to that small gesture, or it doesn't. And either way, you get something you didn't have before. You get clarity instead of a slow, shapeless ache with no name. The message sits there, delivered. Read at 11:42 p.m. This time, you send another one. Not needy, not dramatic. Just, "I miss the old lunches. We should get one on the calendar." Maybe she replies right away. Maybe it takes a day. Maybe, and this is possible too, and it's allowed to be true, she doesn't reply at all, and that silence tells you something you needed to know, something that lets you finally stop checking your phone at 11:42 p.m. wondering what happened. Either way, you'll know. And knowing, even when it hurts, is a kind of relief that the slow fade never gave you. Some friendships end. Some friendships fade. And some, if you're willing to reach across the quiet first, turn out to have been waiting, the the whole time, for someone to say something.